Good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here and welcome to our panel on creative and community work in a virtual world, presented by the Mixed Space here at MAMFest. My name is Lily Stiefel. I'm the founder of the Mixed Space and I'm your moderator today here at this discussion. So I'm super excited to be in conversation with our leaders and creatives who've been able to join us today. We are talking about finding new ways to share your work. We're talking about navigating different industries, activism in the virtual world. Those are just a few juicy bullet points that we are getting into. So let's jump in and start by having our panelists introduce themselves and share what inspires your work.
Okay, I'll introduce myself. My name is Claire Talbot. I'm a creative director and filmmaker and also theater maker. And I think usually what inspires my work is wanting to connect to people in some way. Even if that just means screaming at someone for an hour, like I would call that art as long as it's connection. Yeah.
I'll go next. My name is Sophie. I go by Asian Soph. I am the owner of Mixed Presence and another space called Mixed Made. And what inspires my work is community and solidarity. Not only solidarity acts throughout history, but also continuing that to today and talking long-term political action.
I can share. Hi, everyone. My name is Rahul Yates, and I'm 17 years old, and I am the founder and executive director of Helms of Global Teen, an organization dedicated to raising awareness and building a community for mixed race and multicultural teens. So as you can guess, I am a teen, and growing up being mixed and multicultural was definitely difficult, and I didn't really understand its true nuances until I was old enough to be more aware of society and how my identity interacted with others. And so being a racially ambiguous person, I was always explaining my background to others, never really knowing, should I choose one side, one ethnicity or another, and especially answering the what are you question. And so it was all of those experiences, plus the fact that even though the mixed community is the fastest growing underrepresented group, it's still underrepresented. And so I don't see a lot of people like me in school and the media, et cetera. And so all of those experiences and feelings and thoughts came together. And so that's why I founded my platform, and I wanted to provide a voice for other multiracial and multicultural teens and young people like me, so that they know that they're not alone, and that we are a mixed community. We just have to be that community. So thank you.
I'll go. Hi, my name is John Gansu. I am the co-founder of Amplify Theater Collective, and what we do is that we make art that's specifically focused on highlighting BIPOC work, and my inspiration for art is pretty much similar to that, just finding new ways to bring representation, but also bring people together and just making new opportunities to meet friends, community, and express ourselves.
Hi, my name is Sean Devare, and I'm a New York City-based theater artist and designer. I would say my work is inspired by a sense of curiosity. I think at the root of most of my projects, there's always some question that I just keep digging at and investigating, and it's the kind of pursuit of, where do stories come from? And how do they change? That's kind of at the root of a lot of what I like to do in my performance work. Mythology is very inspiring to me, and folk tales and history, and how do our perceptions of these narratives shift throughout different eras.
And I'll add, my name is Farzana Nayani. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I am a community and diversity consultant and educator and an author of a book called Raising Multiracial Children, and the founder of a channel on Instagram called Multiracial Matters. And what inspires me are the stories of other people and finding the common thread and making sense of it and sharing it back out to other people so that they can see themselves in the work. It's something that really drives me, especially being someone who's multi-ethnic, being Filipino and Pakistani, and not seeing myself in much out there, and other people telling me that they don't see themselves. And so just trying to create that space for others.
Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing. It's really wonderful to hear about the work that you're doing. And we all know with the outbreak of the pandemic, there's been a large shift to working, especially in digital spaces, for some of us now exclusively in digital spaces. So how has that shift changed your work, and how does it affect the way that you do your work?
I could jump in to start off. My book actually came out last year, right at the beginning of the pandemic, and it wasn't anticipated. There was a book tour live that we had planned, and all of that was canceled. And at the beginning, I was sad, of course, but what I came to see was that there were a lot of connections we could make digitally and globally. And actually, the Mixed Space was the first event I did around multiracial identity, and it really kind of opened up the doors for more conversation to happen online with people that I would normally not meet. So there was a lot of pluses to what happened, and we're still in it. So that's still the way that we're, connecting with each other. But it's actually been really cool to see what connections we can make across different parts of the country and around the world.
For me, I would like to add the space that I founded is always digital and always online, but through the pandemic and the tragic death of George Floyd and the rise of people talking about a lot of social justice issues, there was a bigger demand for people wanting more information and people wanting to talk about mental health, and people wanting to talk about their experiences, especially as BIPOC folks, and also talking about the representation. So it really shifted what the work I was doing and a little bit, and how I was talking about it and what kind of posts I was making for them. And it also, I've always amplified other actions and other voices in this space, but definitely it became very heightened afterwards, especially trying to lift up and talk about different organizations and actions that were happening that people could be a part of. Because that's really what people were looking for at the time, like a space to feel understood for just a lot of the stuff that we didn't really have room to necessarily talk about as much. But through the pandemic, a lot of people sat with themselves and really started to see, this is affecting me this way, this is affecting me this way. And a lot of people didn't know how to express that at first, or didn't have an outlet or anything like that. So they were really looking for that specific thing.
I can just add, I think for me it's a bit different, but when the pandemic hit, we were all taken back by surprise. But for me, school and activities were drastically different. And so I ended up having a lot more free time being at home to actually start and grow my platform. And so throughout the pandemic, I've been able to, work with different social media platforms in order to reach a lot of people and create a lot of different posts about a lot of different topics. But I've also, with Zoom and this online technology, I've been able to interview people, especially mixed thought leaders in the mixed community who are doing really important work. And I want to share that work to multiracial and multicultural teens. And so in a lot of ways, it's let me reach people from across the world, teens who with their free time as well are more interested in social justice movements, are more interested in understanding their identity if they identify as mixed race. And so I would say overall the pandemic did really help me just take off my journey into the mixed community.
For me, it definitely has, as similar as other people have said, allowed me to meet new people across the world, interact with people in Shanghai, Singapore. And another really interesting thing is that it's made people kind of learn or have to learn new skills, such as like producing, take up playwriting, learning how to use cameras to shoot their own film. So, and of course, there are good or bads, but I think a lot of artists have taken this adversity and made into an opportunity to learn something new.
Yeah, and I would add on to that and say that when we're in this space of having to learn new things and nobody really knowing what to do, because there's so many, especially like actors who have to be their own grips and their own lighting people and set designers and all of that, I think it's given everyone a chance, as stressful as it is, it has also given everyone a chance to kind of breathe and remember that we're here for fun and we're here because it brings us joy. And it's okay not to know things. And it's like, we don't have to make something perfect because we don't even know what the perfect Zoom play is right now because that probably hasn't been made yet. So it's really cool to be in this space where we're kind of making a new form of art. I think it's actually pretty beautiful.
Yeah, in the theater industry, it has been just a incredibly turbulent last year and a half. But I would say, for myself and a number of my colleagues who tend to work in the lower budget, more experimental scene, this was in a way a tremendous opportunity to, like a few others have said, to learn new things and pivot in a way that we probably wouldn't have if something like this didn't happen. And then all of a sudden it was like, okay, well, now that we do have the ability to reach people anywhere in any time zone, what kind of conversations should we have with them? So I did a show that was a Zoom show for the New Ohio Ice Factory, and it was this incredible multi-country, multi-time zone collaboration and a conversation on race and social justice, and that would not have happened if this pandemic didn't push us into this box. But yeah, it was a rough transition at first, but learning to use Zoom and different streaming media platforms with the specificities that those platforms offer, I think really bore some really amazing fruit. Like a lot of people were, trying really hard to cram in their ways of doing theater, and like, some more successful than others. But I think when we embraced the capabilities of Zoom and streaming media specifically, then a lot more interesting things happened.
Thank you. There's a lot of learning clearly that has come from this time. And I'm sure a lot of us can relate to what's been shared and what we've been going through. So, how has art and community connection brought us through this time? Can you all share how it's helped you get through this time? And like you said earlier, Farzana, we are still in it. Um,
Well, lots of people being in a forced quarantine, um, we heard about deteriorating mental health, and there was lots of statistics that actually have come out about that. But that also forced people to find more community in the virtual space. Whether it was through Instagram, we saw TikTok blow up, we saw um, Instagram Reels come out. So just finding the different spaces that people could interact was definitely something that came through with that. And you know, with art especially, I mean, there is that saying that if you want to know how people felt, look at the art from that time. I'm totally paraphrasing. I'm so sorry to all the artists. I apologize. But, you know, I think that a lot of stuff that came out creatively was um, felt by a lot of people because people were dealing with a lot of emotions that they had to sit with by themselves that they hadn't had to confront before in a very highly stressful time. Still stressful, still a lot going on right now, even to this day, obviously. But I think it just forced people to want to find community in different ways.
I would also like to touch on that, and as I mentioned before, finding the mixed community during the space, and I think being able to connect with organizations from, you know, Southern California, where I'm from, or the Midwest, anywhere across the U.S. and world, has been really valuable to me because I've just been able to interact with so many new people and hear from so many different perspectives. And I think that that has helped me get through the pandemic because you know, there's a lot of days where it's just like sitting at home like this, you know, it sucks a lot of the time. And so being able to look to the light of it is like, oh, you know, I would have never met those people. I probably would have never had these conversations, and I might not have ever, you know, been down the path that I'm currently on now if the pandemic had never happened. And so appreciating those community connections that I've been able to make and the people that I've been able to meet has really helped me get through it and see the light at the end of the tunnel, especially when it feels like there's a lot of darkness and just kind of, we're all over it. We all want to be back to what our normal used to be. But yeah, so community connections has been a huge part of getting through the pandemic for me.
Yeah, for me, so much of my life pre-pandemic was filled with gigs and rehearsals and different projects that I was juggling all the time. And then when all those things fell away, you know, for myself and a lot of other artists and gig workers, like, you know, we were kind of left with all this unstructured time. So for me, the things that got me through were my weekly meetups or monthly events like the mixed space events. You know, I even had just like a small group of friends that would meet up once a week, and we would just listen to a music album and then talk about it, like a little, you know, music listening club. And then my family, who I normally tried to call once a week, like my parents, and often failed, I was able to, you know, do weekly family Zooms, and weirdly, it's almost like I feel closer with them than I did before, even though I only got to see them once in this past year and a half. Um, so yeah, things like that really helped me get through, and um, yeah.
I was going to say with the challenge, it also caused us to prioritize because it's like we don't have the mental bandwidth or, you know, the focus to take on things that we normally don't like, right? So I've seen a lot of people, you know, really start to say no to things that don't matter, whether it be quitting a job or, even certain family relationships in the multiracial community. Sometimes we have relationships with parts of the family that we're just kind of taking care of, but they're not very nice to us. And so I've seen that with different people. On the other hand, there's also like the taking up of different hobbies or starting a business or right, like all these things that folks are talking about. And for me, creatively, I was able to do more writing. I was able to do more reading and just kind of immerse myself in thought. I didn't have the pressure of yeah, I used to travel a lot too, and I just wasn't, and I got to spend more time with my family. So I'm really grateful for that pause and that reset to focus and really kind of bring through like what it is next and have some clarity around that instead of trying to chase after whatever routine I was in already. So I welcome that a lot.
So we've talked a lot about the new projects that have come up and the opportunities that folks or the moments that folks have been able to turn into opportunities, and also sitting with oneself and having to find a way to process all of these feelings. And it, like, the other side of the burgeoning creativity is the moments when we feel isolated and lonely and depressed and disconnected and like uninspired. And so how do you spark creativity, and how do you spark like inspiration as you're working in virtual spaces?
For me, a big thing was turning off the computer um, and taking a break, because even when I wasn't working, I'd be on Instagram looking at other people's things, or I'd be on TikTok, whatever. Um, and that just sucks your brain up so much. And it also makes you miss people more, even though everybody's in the same space, maybe, that doesn't make us miss each other less. So for me, what was really helpful was, and still is, of course, um, is going outside, and whether that's just taking a walk and experiencing, like the other day, I was just walking in the park and I saw a bunch of little birds using a puddle as like a real life bird bath, or like a natural bird bath. And I was like, oh my God, this is so beautiful, like nature at work. And it was beautiful, but I feel like it shouldn't have been that exciting for me, like I should be appreciating that every day. But I'm so used to being sucked into anything that the internet pulls me into, which is, I'm on my phone, I'm on my iPad, I'm on my computer constantly. Um, and I think the only way to replenish our creative um, well is by resting, and especially going back into nature, which is always creating and always going to be creative. Um, yeah, so that's always going to be the one thing I say is turn off the computer, take a hike.
Yeah, definitely engaging my other senses, because I think we were all just so overloaded on screens and just visually. I mean, even the kind of reorientation towards screens, which I was already trying to circumvent in my own theater work. I'm like, oh, the reason why theater is important is because we're spending too much time on screens these days. And then it became, now screens are all you get. And I'm like, but no, they're not. So engaging the other senses, like, you know, music, listening to things while taking walks. Cooking was huge for me, and the mixed space did a really awesome cooking or food event. Yeah, that actually, it became a way for me to connect with my heritage and my sense of home, which, really felt like it was taken away from me. Like my sister has been working on transcribing my grandmother's cookbook, and so that now that's a Google document that I can access and make Indian food, from whenever I want. And looking up other recipes that remind me of Chinatown too, because I'm mixed Chinese Indian. Like for me, food is such a huge part of replenishing. I mean, literally replenishing myself, but feeling culturally and emotionally replenished.
Yeah, I would also like to add that in my case, yes, of course, going outside, I took a lot of walks, made a lot more food, but I also really enjoyed the opportunities that specifically Zoom gave me to be a part of other events, for example. And I know Sean has brought up, but I really appreciate the Mixed Space and their monthly meetups because, even if it doesn't necessarily apply to me or like something that I'm super interested. I go to that Zoom and then I realize, oh, this is actually a really interesting topic. And then it can spark an idea of something. Oh, this reminds me, I want to focus on this, or maybe here's a new idea that I want to look more into. And so it's taking those opportunities and engaging with different groups that I've found have really helped spark my creativity and imagination, creating content, and even just for myself, for understanding my identity. And so I've really enjoyed being able, the lack of that there's no more physical barrier, and it's just, do I want to be on a Zoom for an hour, and what will I get out of that? And I found that a lot of the times I'll get a lot out of it. And so just taking those opportunities that have been given to me and made available that otherwise might not be because of a physical barrier, because of time, school, any activities, anything else. So that's how I've been able to spark some imagination during this time.
I'm also really, oh, sorry. You go ahead.
You go. There you go.
Okay. Also very similarly to Raul, I get a lot of energy from talking to people. I am a true extrovert, but I really enjoyed getting to talk about solidarity and allyship. I actually ran a whole series on that on my page. And then I was out in the community a lot at protests and on the ground and like helping to organize and stuff. So I actually did get a lot of connection that way, but on the other side of that, I also started going to therapy and learned how to do like body scans and checking in with myself, which was something I was not very good at before. And so, I also realized those moments where I did need to take those pauses and really get in tune with myself to kind of keep that spark and that movement going, because I did have a lot of burnout from not just the digital stuff, but also from being out on the ground. And obviously there was big movements going on throughout, and we were in LA, and there was, lots of protests, and there was like some riots and stuff like that. So there was a lot going on in addition to the pandemic. So, getting in to check in with myself and start like working a little bit more in depth on my mental health helped a lot, but also still getting to interact with people and talk about the conversations and the movements and the topics that I love, like solidarity and allyship, also helped a lot too.
For me, I'm going to be really honest. One thing that really motivates me is spite. And I think over the last year, we learned about how hard it can be for people of the BIPOC community to get opportunities and stuff. And, there were a lot of movements like You See Me Now theater online, and learning about who is really controlling a lot of industries. When I say spite, I hope it doesn't come off as some sort of angry or some sort of disingenuity. I hope it comes off as sometimes you really have to find your flock, your community, and that comes out of wanting to be seen. And I think when you really feel like you're in your flock, then you can really start to like move on, you exchange skills, that person's really good at that stuff, yada yada. Your like connections are growing. You have more outlets, more people are, that's more marketing and stuff. And yeah, I think it's just inspirational to just want to be seen and be put out there.
Yeah, to add, I mean, there was a lot of pain that our community was facing. I want to talk about the Asian community and the anti-Asian racism that was faced and was actually overlooked for a large part of the time and still is. And I took to supporting healing spaces and holding space for people to come together, and there was just a lot of like trauma from that. And so what inspired me was the fact that we could come together and talk about it in a safe way and in a way that we owned, and then model that for the rest of the community who maybe hadn't paid attention so much. And that still drives me today. That's still an inspiration. It's just looking at underserved, underrepresented, and historically excluded communities to do something about it. So I think, looking for justice really also comes within us. It's like knowing that we're important and owning and taking up that space and then modeling it to others. So I think youth to adults, and then in this case, like a lot of seniors, right? It was like multi-generational. So it hit me personally a lot. I could picture like any one of those people being one of my grandparents or something. So, I think like honoring like how we feel in the moment also is a spark for that creativity.
Wow, just listening to all of your responses, I had like multiple moments of goosebumps, like naming therapy, being seen, facing pain. Sean, I really appreciated the connection that you were able to draw as well. It's like actually being able to learn more about our culture, our heritage, our ancestry, our history, and traditions. And so I want to know from all of you, like, how do your layered identities, whether it's a gender identity, a cultural identity, an ethnic identity, even the identity of like your creative practice and the work, like all of these layers, like how do they show up in the work that you're doing? How do they interact?
Well, honestly, that's something that's actually already been mentioned here. A lot of times, mixed folks, we don't feel represented and we don't feel seen. Me being mixed Asian, that having that additional layer of being Asian, and we're extremely underrepresented. And even though we've done a lot to contribute to the history of this country for literally decades, it's really just not even talked about and is heavily overlooked. And then our traumas and our experiences are invalidated and overlooked or just not even acknowledged, which is also very traumatizing. So knowing that, being mixed, you often get in spaces and you just find common threads with other people. And a lot of times you tend to just have a lot more empathy, I think, for other folks, just because you can find that common thread, because you're often not finding exactly who you are anywhere else. So you have to just kind of, look for little things. And so that connection shows up. And I think that contributes a lot to being able to create a community space that feels safe and welcoming for all different kinds of people, especially a very underrepresented group like mixed race folks. And before we got on, Farzana had mentioned the census, and mixed multiracial grew exponentially. I actually have the statistic. Hold on. Oh, I should have pulled this up beforehand. But grew from 9 million in 2010 to 33.8 million in 2020, which is crazy. So that's a 276% increase, which coupling that with finding people wanting to find more community, whether it's virtually or in person or anything like that, and taking into account that a lot of people were feeling very invalidated and not seen, it makes you want to get out there and create what you did not have. And that's what very many people in this group actually have done, right? And that's really exciting to actually be in this space and be able to talk about that. So I think that comes through for all of us.
For me, when years before, I'm just gonna wait. Okay, I'm gonna start off with, whenever I'm doing something or working on something, there'll always just be like a part of my identity. There'll always just be like most of the things have like the theme of being Asian, being a person of color, being queer, and just parts of my identity will always just have things like that. And I used to be kind of like embarrassed to kind of be in like predominantly white spaces or something. And like I always used to fear that like people would be like, oh, here comes that kid bringing race into it, or just like being like. And over the years, I learned that there's no reason to be shy or anything, because the more you bring of yourself, the more people are going to see like, oh, this person is vibrant or is like not embarrassed, not shy. And I think an important thing when coming to your work is always bring as much as you can, so that way there's more reasons for your audience to connect with you, and also just feel more genuine.
I love that. That what you just said really is going to inspire me a lot, I think, over the next few years. But I kind of, going back to your question, Lily, when we're talking about how we bring our identity to our work, I'm thinking about how the mixed space started. And for those of you who don't know, it started as a play, which was Lily's senior thesis. And I didn't understand what was going on the whole time we had rehearsals. I was like, we're here and we're just like talking about our experiences and we're just like making friends and just having a good time. Like, this isn't theater. Because I had only known the type of theater that was like, you're going to follow the script that was probably written by a white man, and you have a role and you show up. And if you don't do your job, the director will emotionally manipulate you. And that didn't happen. We had a great time and we made something that was not linear. We made something that didn't necessarily have a plot. It was fully just us, the people who were in that play. And it's funny because we've come kind of full circle, because I'm working on my senior thesis now and I'm doing something that nobody around me understands. But it's 100% me. And I know that, like, I can't tell you what I'm doing, but I know exactly what I'm doing, if that makes sense. And I know it's gonna be something. And I'm thinking about how when we bring ourselves to our creative work, it's not going to make sense, because there is a status quo for theater, for film, for anything that you guys are gonna call art, right? And no one, if they're ever being fully themselves, like you said, John, is going to fully fit into that status quo. But at the same time, everybody's going to understand it, because the more you are yourself, the more you are everyone, which is a whole big conundrum. but yeah, I think you have to bring 100% of who you are to what you're doing, even if that doesn't fit. And that's what this pandemic has showed us, that we have to make new forms of everything. And we have to accept the ways that, the world we are given. On the one hand, we had a pandemic, the world we were given was screens. In a similar sense, all of us here, we were born into certain bodies and into certain identities. And there is no point in trying to go back into the old ways or the ways that make sense. The only thing we have to do is accept what we have and embrace that and build something beautiful out of that.
I'm so inspired by what everyone's sharing here. I want to add that I completely agree that the more we show up, the more that we can be ourselves, the more actually that other people feel comfortable being themselves too, right? And one thing that I've stepped into in the last while has been more of my healing practices. And so I do energetic healing that's based on some ancestral heritage that I have, definitely from the Filipino side of the family and Pacific Islander side. And that was something that I didn't know about or was suppressed or likely through colonization was lost in my family. And having that reignited and brought forth, of course, people are like, what is that? Or, trying to explain it. But again, that's in this, white supremacist society that doesn't understand other modes of healing that are traditional practices in many, many cultures. And so there was this coming back to learning that, like remembering and then offering that up. And I was able to launch a coaching program for BIPOC folks. And the first cohort I did was for mixed race women of color. And it was just such a, coming out of me and then also for them to come out as themselves. So it was like a mutual, like, holding space for each other was great. And I don't think that would have happened had there not have been this like virtual time where we're longing for connection and longing for community and longing for, finding our way. So I'm grateful for that. I'm really grateful people are open to it. I think people themselves are also opening to things because we're just out of our own habits and we're just trying new things and learning and like hungry for something to fill ourselves up. So I think those are all the good parts of this too.
I was going to say, I think someone was talking earlier about finding the common threads. And I think that's something that I think about all the time. And I think that is really informed by my mixed identity, coming from two very distinctly different Asian cultures. Like just having to inhabit those two different worlds, like the more worlds and the more spaces you inhabit and travel through or in, you really do start to see, of course, the differences, but so many of the commonalities. I think our brains are wired more so to find similarities than differences. Maybe that's just my opinion. But finding those patterns really kind of gives you this lens of what a unified humanity could be. And a lot of my work, I do try to be specific to cultures that I'm trying to represent, but as someone who is like a minority of a minority, I'm always drawn to narratives about characters that are outsiders, that are marginalized, even, going as far back as ancient mythology, like the Monkey King, the trickster, like he was like the first marginalized god in Chinese folklore. So yeah, stories like that, and finding those narratives where those characters do find a sense of belonging, it's really important to me. And even if the story is not necessarily about the exact kind of intersections that I live in, there is that shared experience of knowing that, like, oh, I'm having trouble integrating and fitting in and finding a culture. Like I directed a production of She Kills Monsters, which is, very much about LGBTQ culture, but just as much about nerd culture. And, what do we hide and what do we keep to ourselves, and how do we start to share those parts of ourselves?
And I would also just like to add my perspective is at the beginning of the pandemic, when I began going into the mixed community and just seeing what was there, as I never really had the time or the, not necessarily interest, but just I didn't really feel like opening that that side to me because I was still grappling with, am I really mixed? Can I just be Indian? Can I just be white? And so at the start of the pandemic, I was comfortable enough with my identity to see, what are other people saying about this identity. And so the first thing I noticed is that, and it's not a problem at all, it's just that everybody, for the most part, in the mixed community, the thought leaders, people who are running organizations and platforms, are adults. I am the only young person, other than, Claire is pretty young, but but I'm the only person who still has a one in my age, right? And so, um, and so being a young person in this space and being part of these Zooms and having these conversations with people who knew a lot more than I did, who were much more wiser, who seem much, they just, they're kind of like my mixed gods in a way. And so that was a really big part of my experience and how that influenced my work, and making sure that, the content that I was creating for my platform was in a digestible format for teens who might not be as familiar with the lingo that we use, or the people in the mixed community, or the topics that the mixed community talks about. And so that was a huge part of my experience. And then similarly, being mixed Asian and white, and growing up with the uncertainty of my identity and not really understanding, what I was, where I fit in, and being a big part of, I do classical Indian dance. And so that was a huge anchor to my Indian side, but I never, I never fit in with the other kids because I was the only mixed one. And so there was always that difference when, my white dad is picking me up and I'm just surrounded by the other Indian parents, and a bit of a disconnect, but not necessarily a bad one. Just I had a different experience. And so a lot of that just confusion and me trying to force myself into the binary that I feel like our society is, we're slowly moving away from it, but there's still that racial, there's that gender, there's a lot of binaries. And so, you're either this or that, and being mixed is like that third kind of gray category. And so all of that, I feel like, built up inside of me. And so that's why that was a huge part of why I began to become a part of the mixed community, and just seeing what other people are talking about and learning from others. And so that's definitely how it has influenced my work.
Yeah, actually, Rahul just reminded me, even though I didn't grow up studying the tradition, I picked up Carnatic violin. I studied a little bit before the pandemic, but being at home all day definitely gave me time to finally practice and do Zoom lessons with my teacher, who runs this amazing organization called Brooklyn Raga Massive. And they do a lot of streaming events if you're interested in Indian music. But yeah, I think as someone who also grew up with a lot of Western traditions and Eurocentric artistic forms, it has more recently been a kind of life mission to be more holistic in my approach to art and art making, and in the process and in the product. So, finding out, oh, there are other ways to make music and to dance and to write even. It's been really inspirational, and I try to bring that to my work as often as possible. I guess you could say it is a process of decolonization, but I do have this very kind of important idea that I think is kind of like what Claire was saying, but for me, decolonization is kind of incomplete with, say, you're undoing, something, but what are you building? And I do think by hearing from underrepresented cultures, we are building something new and something beautiful.
what have we not talked about yet? Like, what else is on y'all's mind? Remaining thoughts, questions? Like, does anyone on the panel have a question for anyone else on the panel? Is there anything else anyone wants to throw into the space that we haven't talked about yet?
I hate to bring this up actually, but I want to say that we haven't talked about whiteness, which is pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess in thinking about that, it's in one of the last meetups about, or I think it was for Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. There was this notion of Asian American as an umbrella term, and when it gets used and when it doesn't serve us. And I think for the Mixed Asian Media Festival, I think it's of particular importance to talk a bit about that. And even being mixed, a lot of times the assumption is that you're mixed with white. And, you know, as I'm sure Farzana has also experienced, it's like, no, there are other kinds of people. And also there are brown Asians and people who are both brown and, you know, yellow or whatever color you want to put on it. Yeah, like it is really important as a unifying term, and we should have solidarity with each other. But at the same time, it is so important to be specific when we are really trying to talk about specific populations.
Yeah, and I also want to add, I think that it's really great that this festival was even created, and I love that, you know, Mixed Asian Media was formerly known as Hapamag, and I love that it's, you know, blowing up into this way bigger thing. Because I actually used to get so many DMs and questions from people who were mixed Asian, who would be like, "Am I considered mixed?" Because really, it's just not even. I mean, we talk about underrepresentation. I mean, for a very long time, if you were mixed, people just were like, "Oh, you're black and you're white." And that's really just like what the face of being mixed is. And it's like no tea, no shade to anybody, obviously. But it's really nice to see people really step into their identities and, like, you know, realize, oh, I am this multicultural, multiracial, you know, person, but also there's been a lot more people taking pride in being like Afro Latinx and just lots of other mixes that are now getting represented and recognized. And you're seeing a lot more actors and such also representing those identities. So I think that's just really great. And it's awesome to be part of this event and get to be with all you guys too.
Yeah, I was just going to add to what was said, in that the diversity of our community is our strength. And at the same time, we've got to acknowledge that there's, you know, issues. And I talk about this in my book, Horizontal Racism, where there's, you know, conflict across communities or anti-Blackness, right? Or, you know, the privileges of being white adjacent that many Asians have and that, let's say, brown Asians don't, or whatnot, right? And so some of that stuff, the colorism that can come through, is a problem. It's a problem in both sides of my heritage, South Asian and Filipino, and so on, in many communities. So how do we address that if we don't talk about that? Because we're busy trying to be unified against, you know, the general kind of mainstream conversation, but then we don't have a chance to air out what's going on within. And I think that doesn't get looked at as much. I think it really should, though. And so, you know, events like this is where we have a chance to honor all of ourselves, but then also like really dive deeper. So I'm hoping for more of that. And I think these conversations help with that.
Okay, so we are nearing the end of our time together here today. I have a little creative exercise that I would love to end with. And so the prompt is for you to just take a moment to connect with yourself and find a word that is coming up for you that either summarizes this conversation or that feels really present for you right now. And when you have it, just share it into the space.
My word is absolutely empathy. Kind of tacked onto that is solidarity, which is one of my biggest influences in why I do everything that I do. But yeah, I think that that's really, really important, especially considering the times that we're in. Farzana talking about bringing up colorism, horizontal racism, what's going on with not only within the Black community, but also the Asian community, and thinking about my Blasian brothers and sisters as well too, how those identities are layered with one another. There's a lot of work to do.
For me, I would say looking. I'm kind of looking forward to a lot of like things and events. Looking forward to I'm gonna say Shang-Chi on the weekends. I'm looking forward to that. Looking forward to interacting with you all some more. Yeah.
My word would be full. I just feel very full from this conversation, very inspired. I feel I feel very hopeful as well.
My word is home. Yeah, it's a very very loaded word for me, but I'm just so grateful that that this festival exists and that I can actually reach audiences with my show that was picked up for the festival. First Violin, Anugraha. It's in the theatricals. Like I performed a version of it in the pre-pandemic times, and I was always wondering like, oh, but what if I could just put this up in front of more mixed Asian people? And now that can happen. And now that I have the mixed space, all the more to it. I'm just really grateful to be in community with you all and to see where this goes and see who else comes to join us.
My word is hope. I'm just really hopeful for the future of the mixed community as we continue growing and just being in this Zoom with just a few of the many great leaders in this space and just seeing what we can all accomplish.
My word is flow, because we are still in uncertainty and we are going to be going with the flow some more. And so that creativity comes from that. And at the same time, just, kind of being in alignment with whatever it is, spirit, universe, and flowing with that, I think is so huge, just digging deeper into the deeper meaning here. So that's kind of the powerful word that came up for me.
My word was going to be grateful. Sean, you spoke about that. So I actually am going to change it to dream, because this panel, like being here with you, it really feels like a dream come true. Like it feels like all of you and the work that you're doing are like manifestations of my dream for the world that I want to live in and for the communities that I want to bring children into. And so yeah, that's my dream. Like, thank you so much for showing up and for sharing your full selves, and just like the amazing time that I got to spend with you. So thank you, Claire. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Raul. Thank you, Farzana. Thank you, Sophie. Thank you, Jonan. And let's keep it going. Like, thank you so much also to MAMFest, to all of the incredible organizers and thinkers and leaders who have created this entire amazing festival. Sean, like you said, like a lot of the folks here have work that's being shown in this festival. Some of you are speaking at other events. Some of your work is like integral to the rest of this festival. So also I know from speaking with Alex and some of the other folks who've been part of this that this like MAMFest has been a dream, and that the process of creating MAMFest, you know, in many ways is a dream come true. So I really want to just end with encouraging all of us to keep dreaming and to be really loyal and dedicated to our dreams, because obviously, like all of us being here is a sign, is proof that like dreams do come true. So thank you.